Did someone's maid bring her kid to work? Get this little rat out of my event, said Victoria Langford to a 12-year-old girl standing alone on the red carpet. The room went silent, not because people were shocked, but because no one wanted to be the one who spoke up. The girl didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She just stood there, listening to a woman with power, money, and influence decide her worth in front of everyone. What Victoria Langford didn't know was that this 12-year-old girl was not a guest. She was not staff. She was not lost. She was the majority owner of the very company funding the entire event. And in less than 1 hour, Victoria Langford would lose her job, her reputation, and her freedom. The girl's name was Amara Collins, 6 months earlier. The house was already awake, but not in the way it used to be. There were no footsteps moving down the hallway, no quiet conversations behind closed doors, no soft music playing from the kitchen. Just silence, the kind of silence that feels wrong the moment you open your eyes. Amara Collins lay still in her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. She waited. 5 seconds. 10. 20. Nothing. That was when she knew today would be like the others. Empty. She sat up slowly, her feet touching the cold floor. The room was too big for her now. Everything felt oversized. The bed, the furniture, the quiet. 6 months ago, this room had been full of life. Her mother reminding her not to be late. Her father pretending to read the news while watching her pack her school bag. Little moments that felt ordinary back then. Now they were gone. Richard Collins, Catherine Collins, her parents, dead in what the news called a tragic late-night accident. The headlines were careful, polite. They used words like unfortunate, unexpected, unavoidable. But none of those words explained why Amara still woke up every morning expecting to hear her mother's voice. None of them explained why her father's office door was locked and no one would let her inside, and none of them explained why a 12-year-old girl was suddenly living in a mansion that felt more like a museum than a home. She got dressed quietly, folded her blanket the way her mother taught her. Habit was the only thing that still felt normal. Downstairs, the house staff moved carefully around her. They smiled. They spoke softly. They avoided her eyes. Everyone was afraid of saying the wrong thing. Breakfast sat untouched on the long dining table. Amara took one bite, then another, then pushed the plate away. Food had lost its taste months ago. That morning, 2 unfamiliar cars were parked outside. She noticed them immediately. People didn't come here anymore. Not friends, not visitors, not family. Only lawyers. They were waiting in her father's study. Margaret Williams stood when Amara entered the room. She was tall, composed, her posture confident but gentle. Beside her sat Thomas Anderson, older, quieter, with tired eyes. They didn't look like villains. They didn't look like heroes either. They looked like people carrying information that could change a life. "Good morning, Amara," Margaret said. Her voice was calm, careful. Amara nodded and took the chair across from them. It was the same chair her father used during meetings. She barely reached the edge of the desk. Thomas opened a folder, then another, then another. There were too many papers. Margaret spoke slowly. "Amara, your parents prepared for many possibilities, including the one we're now facing." Amara kept her hands in her lap. She had learned that if she stayed very still, the world moved slower. "Your parents were majority owners of Collins Global Holdings," Margaret continued. "They held 89% of the company." The number meant nothing to Amara. It was just a number. Thomas slid a document toward her. "Through trusts and legal protections, that ownership transferred to you." Amara looked at the paper, then back at them. "Transferred how?" she asked. Margaret took a breath. "You are now the primary shareholder." Silence filled the room. Amara waited for the part that was supposed to matter. The explanation. The reason everyone looked so serious. Thomas cleared his throat. In practical terms, he said, you are worth approximately $4.9 billion. Amara blinked once, then asked the only question that felt important. Who's running my parents' company? Margaret and Thomas exchanged a glance. Victoria Langford, Margaret said. She was appointed CEO 3 years ago. The name landed differently. Amara didn't know why, but it stuck. Victoria Langford. She repeated it in her head. Do my parents trust her? Amara asked. Thomas hesitated, just for a moment. They did, he said. At least, they wanted to. Amara leaned forward. That's not an answer. Margaret nodded. Your father had concerns, she said, which is why we're here. Thomas opened another folder, thicker this time. Inside were charts, transfers, account numbers, money moving where it shouldn't have. Over the past 2 years, Thomas said, $18.7 million went missing. Amara's fingers tightened. Missing how? Shell companies, Margaret answered. Fake vendors, offshore accounts. And all of it, Thomas added, leads back to Victoria Langford. The room felt colder. Amara swallowed. What did my dad do? She asked. Margaret's voice dropped. He hired private auditors. He documented everything. Thomas leaned forward. He scheduled a meeting with federal investigators. Amara looked up sharply. When? Thomas didn't look away. 3 days before the accident. The silence returned, heavier this time. Amara stared at the desk, at the grain of the wood, at the place where her father used to rest his hand. Nobody spoke, because there were no words that made sense of that timing. Finally, Amara spoke. So she's still there, she said. Running the company. Margaret nodded. She believes you're too young to matter. Amara stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak, but her voice didn't. I want to see her. Thomas frowned. Amara, that's not... I want to see her, she repeated. Margaret studied her for a long moment. There is an annual charity gala, she said. It was founded by your parents. Victoria Langford hosts it every year. Amara met her eyes. Then that's where I'll go. Margaret hesitated. It will be public. Good, Amara said. She turned toward the window, toward the long driveway, toward the world that had already decided she was small. She laughed at people like me, Amara said quietly. Didn't she? Margaret didn't answer. She didn't have to. That night, Amara stood in front of the mirror wearing her father's old jacket. It was too big. The sleeves hung past her hands. The weight of it rested on her shoulders. But it smelled like him. She looked at her reflection, 12 years old, quiet, unassuming, and completely underestimated. 6 months earlier, she had lost everything. Now, she was about to take it back. The days leading up to the gala passed slowly. Too slowly. Every morning, Amara woke up with the same weight in her chest, the same quiet house, the same unanswered questions. She started noticing things she had never paid attention to before. People whispering when she entered a room, staff members lowering their voices, phone calls that stopped the moment she appeared. Everyone knew something. No one wanted to be the one to say it. Margaret and Thomas visited often. They spoke in careful tones, as if the walls themselves were listening. They explained things Amara never thought she would need to understand. Boards, votes, legal thresholds. They told her that despite owning most of the company, she technically had no public authority yet. Victoria Langford controls the narrative, Margaret said. She controls the image. And people believe images, Thomas added. More than documents. Amara listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't pretend to understand everything. But she remembered every word. At night, she sat alone in her room, reading her father's old notebooks. He wrote in short sentences, direct, precise, dates, names, amounts. The deeper she read, the clearer the picture became. Victoria Langford hadn't just stolen money. She had reshaped the company around herself, moved loyal people into key positions, removed anyone who asked too many questions. She hadn't been reckless. She had been patient. Amara closed the notebook one night and stared at the ceiling. "Did you know?" she whispered. To her. The ceiling didn't answer. 2 days before the gala, Margaret brought a dress. It was simple, dark blue, nothing extravagant. "No logos," Margaret said. "No jewelry." "Why?" Amara asked. "Because the moment you walk in," Margaret replied, "she will underestimate you. We want that." Amara nodded. Underestimated was something she knew well. On the night of the gala, the city shimmered. Lights, cameras, security. Cars lined the street like a parade of power. From the back seat, Amara watched people step out, laughing, hugging, posing for photos. They looked untouchable. The car stopped. Thomas opened the door. "Once we walk in," he said quietly, "there's no controlling how this goes." Amara stepped out. The noise hit her immediately. Music, voices, flashes of cameras. She clutched the folded documents under her arm, the only proof she had that she wasn't crazy. Inside, the ballroom was even larger than she remembered. Gold and glass everywhere. Everything designed to make people feel important. Victoria Langford stood at the center of it all, laughing, greeting donors, perfect posture, perfect smile. She didn't see Amara at first. When she did, her expression shifted, not to surprise, to irritation. Victoria walked toward her slowly, heels clicking against the marble floor. She stopped just short of Amara and looked her up and down. The silence around them grew thick. "Excuse me," Victoria said, her voice sharp but controlled. "Are you lost?" Amara didn't answer. Victoria glanced at the documents in her hands. "Oh no," she sighed. "Not another one." She turned slightly as if addressing an invisible audience. "These charity events attract all kinds of people," she said. "Some of them don't understand boundaries." She looked back at Amara. "Who did you come with?" Amara swallowed. "I came for the board." That was when Victoria laughed. Not nervously, not politely. She laughed with confidence, with entitlement. "The board?" she repeated. "Sweetheart, this is not a school assembly." A few people nearby chuckled. Victoria's smile widened. "Security," she said casually. "Please help her find her way out." No one moved immediately. Phones were already out, recording. Victoria's jaw tightened. She reached into her purse, pulled out cash, and let it fall to the floor. The sound echoed. "There," she said. "Take this. Go buy yourself something, and don't come back." Amara felt her face burn, but she didn't bend down. She didn't cry. She looked straight at Victoria. "You laughed at me," she said quietly. "But you didn't ask my name." Victoria scoffed. "I don't need your name." Before she could say more, Margaret stepped forward. "You might want it," Margaret said. "You're going to hear it a lot." Victoria turned. "And you are?" "Her attorney," Margaret replied, "and her guardian." That was the first crack. Small, almost invisible, but real. Victoria straightened. "This event is private," she snapped. "You have no right." Thomas interrupted. "She has every right." Victoria laughed again, but this time it was thinner. "Who do you think you are?" she asked. Thomas answered calmly. "We're the people who know what you did." The music softened. People leaned closer. Victoria's smile faltered. "This is inappropriate," she said. "Remove them." Margaret raised her phone. "Before that," she said, "you should know this is live." Victoria froze. "Live?" she repeated. Margaret nodded. Thousands are watching. For the first time that night, Victoria looked uncertain. She glanced around the room, at the phones, at the cameras, at the faces that had stopped smiling. Amara took a step forward. "My name is Amara Collins," she said. The room stilled. "Richard Collins was my father." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Victoria's face went pale. "That's not possible," she whispered. "He didn't have—" Amara didn't raise her voice. "He did," she said. "And he trusted you." The silence was unbearable. "You stole from him," Amara continued. "You thought no one would notice." Victoria shook her head violently. "This is a lie," she said. "A cruel lie." Thomas opened the folder. $18.7 million, he said, "and a meeting scheduled with federal investigators." Victoria stepped back. "You're bluffing," she whispered. Margaret shook her head. "No," she said. "You're exposed." Sirens echoed outside. Someone screamed. Victoria turned toward the entrance, then back at Amara. For a moment, the power shifted, and everyone felt it. Police officers entered the ballroom. Their presence cut through the noise. Victoria pointed at Amara. "Arrest her!" she shouted. "She's a child! This is manipulation!" The officer didn't even look at Amara. "Victoria Langford," he said, "you are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy." The cuffs closed around her wrists. The sound was final. Victoria screamed. She struggled. She shouted threats. No one helped her. Amara stood still, documents pressed to her chest. She felt nothing. Not relief, not joy, just truth. As Victoria was led away, Amara spoke one last time. "You laughed at me," she said, "but you never asked who I was." The doors closed, and the room erupted. But Amara was already walking away. The night didn't end when the doors closed behind Victoria Langford. It only changed. Outside, red and blue lights painted the street. Sirens echoed between the buildings. Reporters pushed past security, shouting questions no one was ready to answer. Inside the ballroom, the music had stopped completely. People stood frozen, phones still raised, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. A child, a CEO, handcuffs. Reality took a few seconds to catch up. Then the noise exploded. Voices overlapped. Names were whispered. Old conversations replayed in people's heads. Some remembered moments when Victoria had silenced dissent. Others remembered money disappearing without explanation. Too late. Amara stood near the edge of the room, watching adults scramble to rewrite their own memories. Margaret placed a hand on her shoulder. "You should go," she said softly. "You don't need to hear this part." Amara nodded. As they walked out, she caught fragments of conversation. "How did no one know? I always felt something was off. She fooled all of us." The truth was simpler. They knew. They just didn't care enough. Outside, cameras turned toward Amara. Questions flew through the air. "Is it true? How did you find out? What will happen to the company?" Thomas stepped in front of her. "No statements," he said firmly. "Not tonight." The car door closed. Silence returned. Amara leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, from the release. At home, the house felt different. Still quiet, still large, but no longer empty. Margaret stayed the night. She sat with Amara at the kitchen table, 2 cups of untouched tea between them. "You were brave," Margaret said. Amara stared into the cup. "I didn't feel brave," she replied. "I felt tired." Margaret nodded. "That's what bravery feels like when it's real." Over the next few days, the world reacted. News channels replayed the footage again and again. Headlines competed for attention. "Billionaire orphan exposes CEO. 12-year-old ends corporate dynasty. Power shift at Collins Global." The video went viral. People slowed it down, zoomed in, analyzed every expression. They debated whether Amara was manipulated, whether it was staged, whether she even understood what she'd done. Amara didn't watch. She was busy preparing for something much harder. The board. The emergency board meeting was held 3 days later. The room was smaller than the ballroom, colder, less forgiving. No applause, no cameras, just faces that had once nodded at Victoria now looking for direction. Amara sat at the head of the table. Her feet didn't touch the floor. That detail bothered some people. One board member cleared his throat. "With all due respect," he said, "this is unprecedented. She's a minor." Amara listened. Another spoke. "We can appoint an interim executive until she's of age." A third leaned back. "This company cannot be run by emotions." Amara folded her hands. Margaret stood. "My client owns 89% of this company," she said. "She has full authority under the trust." One man scoffed. "In theory," he said. "But in practice," Amara interrupted him. "You supported her," she said. The man froze. "You supported Victoria Langford," Amara continued. "You signed off on decisions that hurt people. You ignored warnings." She looked around the table. "You thought I wouldn't notice." No one spoke. Amara took a breath. "I'm not here to run day-to-day operations," she said. "I'm here to clean this up." She slid a folder forward. "Anyone who enabled her will be removed." The message was clear. Some faces turned pale. Others nodded quietly. By the end of the meeting, 3 board members were gone. No shouting, no drama, just consequences. A new interim CEO was appointed. Someone boring, someone careful, exactly what the company needed. Outside the boardroom, employees waited. They didn't know what to expect. When Amara walked out, no one clapped. They watched. Amara stopped. "I won't pretend to know everything," she said, "but I know what it feels like to be ignored." She looked at a janitor standing near the wall. "I see you," she said. The man blinked, surprised. Something shifted. The trial began months later. Victoria Langford sat at the defense table, hair pulled back, expression controlled. She no longer laughed. The courtroom was packed. Amara took the stand on the 3rd day. She was smaller than the witness chair. A cushion had been added. The prosecutor asked gentle questions. Amara answered clearly. She described the gala, the laughter, the money on the floor. She paused only once, when she spoke about her parents. Victoria stared straight ahead. The jury watched Amara closely, not as a child, as a person. The defense tried to discredit her. They suggested manipulation, coaching, emotional confusion. Amara listened, then said quietly, "She laughed at me. That wasn't confusion." The room went still. When the verdict came, it wasn't dramatic. Just words. Guilty. On all counts. Victoria Langford was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. No applause, no cheers. Just a quiet understanding that something had ended. The trial began months later. By then, the world had already chosen sides. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered every morning. Some carried signs demanding justice. Others accused a child of destroying a successful woman's life. Cameras lined the steps. Commentators rehearsed their narratives. Everyone wanted a simple story. There wasn't one. Inside the courtroom, the air felt heavy. Not dramatic, not loud, just tense. Victoria Langford sat at the defense table, her hair pulled back neatly, her expression carefully controlled. She no longer smiled. The woman who once laughed in a ballroom now avoided eye contact with everyone, including the girl seated across the room. Amara Collins sat beside Margaret Williams. Her feet still didn't touch the floor. A small cushion had been placed on the chair. That detail bothered some people. They whispered about it. Too young, too small, too much power. The judge entered. The room stood. And just like that, the trial that everyone had been waiting for began. The prosecution moved slowly, methodically. They didn't rush for emotion. They built structure. Documents first, bank transfers, shell companies, email trails, screens lit up with charts showing money flowing out of Collins Global and into accounts Victoria Langford controlled. Witnesses followed, former employees, accountants, auditors, people who had been ignored, silenced, pushed aside. One by one, they described the same pattern: questions punished, concerns dismissed, careers quietly destroyed. Victoria listened without reacting. Her attorneys objected constantly. They questioned credibility, motives, timing. They painted Victoria as a visionary executive betrayed by circumstance. Then they shifted tactics. They brought up Amara, not directly at first, but subtly. She's a child. She doesn't understand corporate complexity. She was emotionally vulnerable. The implication was clear. Someone else had pulled the strings. Amara felt the eyes on her. She kept her hands folded, her posture straight. Margaret leaned slightly toward her. "Remember," she whispered, "you don't owe anyone perfection." On the third day, Amara was called to the stand. The courtroom changed. People leaned forward. Reporters adjusted their cameras. A child witness was rare. A child billionaire was unprecedented. Amara stepped up carefully. The bailiff helped adjust the microphone. She took a breath. The prosecutor's voice was gentle. "Can you tell us your name?" "Amara Collins." "How old are you?" 12. A murmur rippled through the room. The prosecutor nodded. "Amara, can you tell the court why you attended the charity gala that night?" Amara didn't answer immediately. She glanced briefly toward Victoria, then back at the prosecutor. "Because it belonged to my parents," she said, "and because I wanted the truth." She described the gala slowly, the lights, the noise, the laughter. When she spoke about the money thrown on the floor, her voice didn't shake, but some jurors looked away. "And how did that make you feel?" the prosecutor asked. Amara paused. "Small," she said, "like I wasn't real." The defense attorney stood quickly. "Objection," he said. "Emotional speculation." The judge raised a hand. "Overruled." Amara continued. "She laughed at me, not because of what I did, but because she thought I couldn't fight back." The courtroom was silent. Then the defense began their cross-examination. They were polite, measured. They asked about her guardians, her lawyers, her preparation. "Did anyone tell you what to say?" "No." "Did anyone explain the documents to you?" "Yes." "So you didn't discover this on your own?" Amara looked at him. "I discovered what mattered," she said. "She stole from my parents." The attorney tried another angle. "Do you understand that businesses fail? That executives make mistakes?" "Yes." "And do you understand that accusing someone publicly can ruin their life?" Amara nodded. "Yes," she said. "And so can stealing $18 million. A few gasps escaped the gallery. The attorney hesitated. The judge watched closely. "Amara," the attorney said, "do you hate Victoria Langford?" Amara thought for a moment. "No," she said. "I don't trust her." The distinction landed heavily. When Amara stepped down, the room felt different. Not triumphant. Exposed. The defense called their witnesses. Former colleagues who praised Victoria's leadership. Industry figures who spoke about her reputation. They painted her as ambitious, driven, misunderstood. Victoria herself took the stand on the final week. She spoke clearly, carefully. She denied intent, blamed oversight, delegated responsibility downward. "I trusted the wrong people," she said. "I never meant to harm anyone." The prosecutor waited, then asked one question. "Did you laugh at Amara Collins?" Victoria hesitated. The pause was short, but it was there. "I don't recall," she said. The prosecutor played the video. The courtroom watched. The laughter echoed through the speakers. Clear, unmistakable. Victoria's jaw tightened. "No further questions," the prosecutor said. Closing arguments followed. The prosecution spoke about accountability, about power unchecked. The defense spoke about doubt, about youth, about manipulation. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Outside, the world argued non-stop. Was justice possible? Could a system built by adults fairly judge a case like this? When the jury returned, the room stood again. The foreperson's voice was steady. "On the charge of wire fraud, guilty. On the charge of embezzlement, guilty. Count after count, guilty." Victoria Langford closed her eyes. No tears. No outburst. Just a long exhale. The sentencing came weeks later. 30 years in federal prison. No early release, no deals. As Victoria was led away, she turned once. She looked at Amara. For a brief moment, there was no anger, only something like regret. Amara didn't look away. She didn't smile either. When it was over, people expected relief, celebration, closure. But what Amara felt instead was weight, because justice, she learned, is heavy, and carrying it was only just beginning. When the courtroom emptied, the noise didn't follow Amara outside. It stayed behind. What followed her instead was silence, the kind that settles into your bones when something irreversible has happened. Outside, reporters shouted questions, flashes exploded in every direction, but Amara didn't stop, didn't wave, didn't speak. She walked past them like they weren't there, because in that moment, she wasn't a symbol. She wasn't a headline. She was a 12-year-old girl who had just watched an adult world collapse under its own weight. The ride home was quiet. Margaret sat beside her, Thomas in the front seat. No one spoke. There was nothing left to explain. That night, Amara didn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. For the first time since her parents died, she wasn't replaying their voices. She was replaying Victoria's laughter. Not the sound, the certainty behind it, the belief that nothing could touch her. Amara turned onto her side and whispered into the dark. She really thought she was untouchable. Margaret heard her. "Most people with power do," she said quietly. "That's why they're dangerous." The following weeks passed slowly. Victoria Langford disappeared from public view. No statements, no interviews. Her legal team spoke for her. Carefully worded phrases, empty reassurances. But the footage lived on. Every laugh, every smirk, every second replayed, analyzed, shared. The narrative shifted. No longer about money, about arrogance, about how power looks right before it falls. Amara returned to school. Nothing about the building had changed. Same lockers, same classrooms, but everything else had. Teachers hesitated before calling on her. Classmates stared too long or not at all. Some treated her like a celebrity, others like a threat. One boy asked quietly, "Is it true you put someone in prison?" Amara thought for a moment. "No," she said. "She put herself there." He didn't respond. At Collins Global, the shockwaves hit harder. Executives scrambled to distance themselves. Statements were rewritten. Old emails vanished. People who once praised Victoria now claimed they had always doubted her. Amara noticed. She sat quietly in meetings, listening. She learned who changed stories, who avoided responsibility, who stayed consistent. Patterns formed quickly. One afternoon, a senior executive spoke confidently about transparency. Amara raised her hand. "When did you first know money was missing?" she asked. The room went still. The executive shifted. I don't recall the exact—" "Because you signed this," Amara said, sliding a document across the table. Silence. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She let the truth sit there. The executive resigned 2 weeks later. Word spread. Not that Amara was ruthless, that she remembered. The media tried again. They reframed the story. What happens when a child grows up too fast? Is this justice or trauma? Psychologists debated her mental state. Pundits questioned her guardians. Amara ignored it all. Instead, she asked Thomas for numbers. How many people lose jobs when corruption like this goes unchecked? Thomas hesitated. Thousands, he said. Sometimes tens of thousands. Amara nodded. Then that's who I'm responsible for, she said. Not headlines. She began spending afternoons walking through different departments, not announcing herself, just observing. She watched who spoke and who stayed quiet, who took credit, who did the work. One janitor stopped her once, startled. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I didn't mean to. It's okay, Amara replied. What's your name? He told her. She remembered it. Later that week, she corrected a board member who referred to him as staff. He has a name, she said. Use it. The room shifted. Slowly, very slowly, the culture began to change. Not because of policies, because of presence. Amara didn't try to be intimidating. She was just impossible to ignore. Still, the weight returned at night. The house was quieter now, but not peaceful. One evening, she asked Margaret, "Do you think she regrets it?" Margaret considered the question. "I think she regrets being caught," she said. "But regret isn't the same as understanding." Amara nodded. "I don't want to become like her," she said. Margaret smiled softly. "Then you won't. You're already asking the right question." Months passed. The appeal was denied. Final, unmovable. Victoria Langford entered federal prison without ceremony. No cameras, no speeches, just iron doors closing. Amara watched none of it. Instead, she stood in her father's office, holding the old notebook. She added one sentence of her own on the last page. Power without humility always collapses. She closed the book. The trial was over. But the consequences were just beginning. And Amara knew something now that no court could teach. Justice isn't an ending. It's a responsibility. And carrying it changes you forever. The backlash didn't arrive all at once. It crept in, quietly, strategically. At first, it looked like concern. Opinion pieces appeared overnight. Well-written, calm, reasonable. They didn't attack Amara directly. They questioned the system. Are we prepared, one article asked, to let children shape corporate justice? Another followed. Trauma can distort perception. Even sincere witnesses can be mistaken. The words were soft, but the message was sharp. Doubt. Amara saw the shift before anyone else did. She noticed it in the questions reporters asked, in the way interviews were framed. No longer, what happened, but what if it didn't happen the way we think? At school, teachers avoided discussing current events. Parents lingered too long at pickup, watching her like she was something fragile or dangerous. One afternoon, a guidance counselor asked her if she wanted to talk. I'm fine, Amara said politely. The counselor smiled the way adults do when they don't believe you. If you ever feel overwhelmed, she said, it's okay to step back. Step back. From what? From the truth? At home, Margaret read through stacks of mail. Some letters were supportive, grateful, personal. Others weren't. They accused Amara of manipulation, of greed, of cruelty. One letter said simply, "You should have stayed quiet." Margaret threw it away. Amara didn't ask to read it. She already knew what it said. The real pressure came online. Short clips, edited quotes, slow-motion replays of her testimony. People dissected her expressions. She doesn't look sad enough. She looks coached. She looks cold. They argued about a child's face like it was evidence. Amara stopped reading comments, not because they hurt, but because they distracted. Instead, she focused on Collins Global. The company was stabilizing, but uncertainty lingered. Some partners delayed decisions, others demanded reassurances. Executives came to meetings tense, careful with every word. Amara listened more than she spoke. She learned quickly that power isn't about volume, it's about consistency. One meeting dragged on for hours, arguments circling without resolution. Amara waited, then asked one question. What decision protects the most people long-term? The room went quiet. The answer was obvious. They took it. Afterward, Margaret smiled. You're learning faster than most adults, she said. Amara shrugged. I don't have time to be wrong, she replied. Still, nights were the hardest. The house felt heavier now, filled with echoes of conversations she never wanted to have. One night she dreamed of the gala again. Not the laughter. The moment before it. The pause. The breath the room took before choosing silence. She woke up sweating. The next morning she asked Thomas something unexpected. How many cases never make it to court? She asked. Thomas hesitated. Most of them, he said. Why? Because people don't have resources, or credibility, or someone willing to stand beside them. Amara nodded. She didn't say anything else, but she remembered. A week later, a late-night show host made a joke, a quick line, a laugh from the audience. A billionaire kid putting adults in jail. Guess bedtime comes with subpoenas now. The clip went viral. People laughed. Amara watched it once, then turned the screen off. Margaret was furious. They crossed a line, she said. We can respond. Amara shook her head. No, she said. Let them laugh. Margaret paused. That's what she did, Amara added. And look where it got her. Something changed after that. Amara stopped reacting. She stopped explaining herself. She focused on building something that didn't rely on public approval. Quietly, she began meeting with people who had been ignored. Whistleblowers, former employees, consultants pushed out for asking questions. They didn't come to her office. She went to them. No cameras, no announcements, just conversations. Patterns emerged. Fear, retaliation, silence. Amara documented everything. One afternoon, an executive tried to dismiss a complaint. This is minor, he said. Not worth the attention. Amara looked at him. Minor to who? She asked. He didn't answer. She replaced him a month later. Word spread internally. Not that Amara was harsh, that she was precise. The media noticed the shift. Articles changed tone again. She's quieter now. She's harder to read. She's not playing the role they expected. That was true. Amara wasn't playing any role. She was growing. One evening, she sat with Margaret on the back steps, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. Do you miss being invisible? Margaret asked gently. Amara thought about it. About mornings before headlines, before courtrooms, before people said her name like it belonged to them. Yes, she said honestly. Margaret nodded. Me too, she admitted. They sat in silence for a while. Then Amara spoke again. But if I was invisible, she said, I wouldn't have seen how many people need someone to not look away. Margaret smiled softly. That's the cost, she said, and the reason. Amara looked back at the house, at the windows, at the quiet rooms. I don't want to be remembered for what I took from her, she said. I want to be remembered for what I protected. Margaret didn't answer. She didn't need to. The backlash hadn't broken Amara. It had clarified her, and as the noise slowly faded, something stronger replaced it. Focus. The kind that doesn't need applause. The kind that lasts. The first real changes didn't make headlines. They didn't trend. They didn't go viral. They happened quietly. At Collins Global, meetings began to feel different. Not louder, not friendlier, more honest. People stopped speaking in rehearsed phrases. They asked real questions. They disagreed openly, not because they felt safe, because they felt watched. Amara never threatened anyone. She never raised her voice. She asked for explanations, and she waited. Silence no longer worked. One department audit revealed something small, a rounding error, barely noticeable. Amara flagged it. "Why wasn't this corrected?" she asked. The answer was familiar. "It's insignificant," someone said. "It's always been done this way." Amara nodded. "Then change the way," she replied. The correction uncovered another, then another. Within weeks, a pattern emerged. Not theft, complacency, the kind that grows when no one believes there will be consequences. Amara issued a company-wide message, short, clear. Integrity is not a department, it's a habit. Employees read it twice. Some scoffed, others felt relieved. For the first time in years, people weren't guessing what leadership wanted. They knew. Outside the company, the foundation quietly launched its first initiative. No press conference, no celebrity endorsements, just a phone number and a promise. Legal support for minors facing exploitation or abuse. Within hours, calls began coming in. Not hundreds, thousands. Margaret staffed the lines with professionals, lawyers, counselors, social workers. Amara reviewed the first reports herself. Names removed, details anonymized, patterns repeated again. Adults in power, children ignored, systems designed to look away. Amara closed the folder and stared out the window. "This is bigger than I thought," she said. Margaret nodded. "It always is," she replied. "That's why people pretend it isn't." Amara didn't pretend. She redirected funds, expanded the team, authorized emergency actions. Some advisors warned her to slow down. "Foundations need time," they said. "Processes." Amara listened, then asked one question. "How many children can wait?" No one answered, so she moved forward. At 13, she was no longer just reacting. She was shaping outcomes. The media noticed the shift. Articles softened. She's building something. She's different from expectations. But Amara didn't read them. She spent her time visiting offices, meeting staff, listening more than she spoke. One afternoon, she attended a training session meant for new hires. She sat in the back, unannounced. The instructor froze when he noticed her. "Please," Amara said, "continue." He did. The session focused on ethics, on reporting concerns, on accountability. At the end, Amara stood. "If you see something wrong," she said, "and you're afraid to report it, that's already a failure." The room was silent. "I don't expect perfection," she continued. "I expect honesty." Someone raised a hand. "What if honesty costs us our jobs?" they asked. Amara didn't hesitate. "Then it costs the wrong people their jobs," she said. Word spread quickly. People began reporting issues that had been buried for years. Not all of them were crimes. Some were just mistakes left to rot. They were addressed, corrected, documented. Trust didn't return overnight. But it started to move. At school, things shifted too. Teachers stopped treating her like glass. Classmates stopped whispering as much. One day, a girl approached her quietly. "My brother called the foundation," she said. "You helped him." Amara nodded. "I'm glad." The girl hesitated. "Thank you." That mattered more than any headline ever had. Still, not everyone approved. A business magazine ran a feature questioning Amara's leadership style. Too cautious, too idealistic, too young. She read the article once, then closed it. That evening, Thomas asked her something. "Do you ever worry," he said, "that you're doing too much?" Amara thought carefully. "I worry more about doing too little," she replied. The company's quarterly report came out. Revenue up, turnover down, compliance improved. Analysts were surprised. They called it a fluke. Amara smiled at that. Flukes don't repeat. The foundation released its first impact report. 57 cases prevented, 9 active investigations supported, 3 prosecutions initiated, no faces, no names, just results. Amara didn't celebrate. She added a note to the next budget. Increase capacity. Because this wasn't a moment. It was a direction. Late one night, alone in her room, Amara opened her father's notebook again. She added another line beneath the last. Power used quietly lasts longer. She closed the book. Outside, the world kept arguing. Inside, something solid was forming. Not an empire, a standard. And it was starting to spread. Time stopped being measured in headlines. It moved in outcomes. 2 years passed. Amara grew taller. Her voice deepened slightly. Her posture changed. Not because she tried to look older, because responsibility reshapes the body before it reshapes the face. At 15, she no longer sat quietly in the back of rooms. She stood at the side, observed, intervened only when necessary. Collins Global was no longer defined by what it had survived. It was defined by what it refused to repeat. Compliance systems became models. Transparency reports were published publicly. Independent audits were mandatory, not optional. Other companies noticed. Not because it was noble, because it worked. Executives requested meetings. Consultants asked questions. Boards wanted to understand how a child-led company had stabilized so quickly. Amara answered selectively. She didn't give speeches about morality. She talked about structure. People don't fail systems, she said once. Systems teach people what they can get away with. The quote spread. It appeared in business journals, in classrooms, in policy drafts. The foundation expanded beyond national borders. Partnerships formed quietly. Legal frameworks adapted. Emergency funds were established in regions where children had no protection at all. Amara visited none of them. Not yet. She believed distance mattered. That help didn't require visibility. Instead, she met with people who shaped rules. Judges, regulators, educators. She listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, it was brief. What happens when a child tells the truth and no one believes them? Silence always followed. The question didn't accuse, it exposed. At 17, she testified again, not in a criminal case, in a legislative hearing. No cameras were allowed. The room was smaller, the stakes larger. She spoke about incentives, about retaliation, about silence as currency. She didn't mention Victoria Langford. She didn't need to. Everyone knew the story. Outside, critics still existed. Some accused her of building influence too early, too quietly. She's shaping power structures, one columnist warned. As if that's not dangerous. Amara read the article, then archived it. At school, she graduated without ceremony. No valedictorian speech, no applause. She declined interviews. That night, she walked through the empty halls one last time. She didn't feel nostalgic. She felt finished. At Collins Global, a new generation of leadership emerged. People hired under the new standards, trained under accountability, not loyalty. One executive once asked her, "Do you think this culture will last after you step away?" Amara answered honestly, "It won't if people need me to enforce it." That was the point. The foundation released its 5-year report. Numbers spoke louder than praise. Thousands protected, hundreds of interventions, dozens of systemic changes. Amara didn't frame it as success. She framed it as baseline. One evening, she stood alone in her father's office again. The notebook was full now, margins crowded with notes, observations, corrections. She closed it gently and placed it back in the drawer. Her phone buzzed. A message from a junior lawyer in another country. "We used your framework today. It worked." Amara typed a single reply. "Good. Improve it." She looked out the window. The city lights stretched endlessly, each one a story, each one a choice. She understood something now that had taken others decades to learn. Power isn't taken, it's constructed, maintained, normalized. And the most dangerous form of power is the one people stop questioning. Amara hadn't stopped. She never planned to. Because somewhere, someone else was being laughed at. And the distance between laughter and silence was still too short. Years later, people would still ask how it started. They would point to the trial, to the gala, to the moment a woman laughed and a room chose silence. But Amara knew better. It didn't start there. It started earlier, in the spaces between moments, in the way people looked away when looking was inconvenient. By the time she turned 18, her name no longer surprised anyone. It appeared in places that didn't chase attention: policy drafts, training manuals, legal frameworks. She didn't attend ceremonies, she declined awards. When asked why, she gave the same answer every time. "Attention changes behavior," she said. "I prefer results." Collins Global continued to grow, not explosively, sustainably. It became the company others cited when asked what accountability could look like in practice. Not perfect, but transparent. The foundation reached a scale no one had predicted. Entire programs were modeled after it. Governments adapted parts of its structure. Universities studied its outcomes. Amara rarely spoke at public events. When she did, it was short. She never told her story from beginning to end. She focused on one detail. "The room," she would say. "The moment everyone knew something was wrong and waited." She let that sit, because everyone understood what she meant. One evening, much later, Amara stood in a quiet room far from cameras. The house was different now, lived in, warm. She held the old jacket again, the one that had once been too big. It fit. She smiled at that, not because of nostalgia, because of timing. She thought about Victoria Langford. Not often, not with anger, with distance. She wondered if Victoria had understood what she lost. Not the job, not the freedom, the moment to choose differently. Amara placed the jacket back and turned off the light. Outside, a city moved on. People argued, people laughed, people stayed silent, and sometimes someone spoke up. That was enough. In the end, Amara never asked to be powerful. She asked questions. She remembered answers. She refused to disappear. And that changed everything. Because power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like a child who doesn't laugh back. And a world that learns too late why that matters.